Hello, everyone, and welcome back once again to the Rally DNA podcast. This week's episode will be a highly topical look into perhaps the biggest news governing the shape of the World Rally Championship in recent memory, namely the FIA's proposal to radically alter the Rally1 rule set from 2025 and beyond. We'll be assessing the fallout from the World Motorsport Council, including our thoughts on the decision by the WRC working group to banish the hybrid element from next year entirely, the paring back of Rally 1's aerodynamic allowance, and of course the overarching mission to drive down the ultimate cost of competing at the top of the rallying world via the staggered introduction of Gen 2 Rally 1 cars. There can be no doubt that a concerted effort to reduce the cost of competing in Rally 1 is necessary, of course, with cars in the top class reckoned to cost in the region of €1 million apiece. That's far from small beer, even for international automotive giants like Toyota and Hyundai. And as for M Sport, forget about it. We'll also be tackling the mooted Rally 2 Plus category and what that comprises, effectively a kit of parts designed to boost performance for those crews competing on WRC events, at a cost, of course, and all in an attempt to shrink the gap between the upper two rungs of the WRC. There's a massive amount to unpick here. So without further ado, welcome Killian, welcome Adam, welcome back. What do you guys make so far of the first two seasons of Rally One? What will you take away from the cars we've had thus far?
Well, I think for me, I quite like the cars themselves. I don't think, having seen them in action themselves, I don't think anyone can be in any doubt that they do bring a great element of drama. They're very exciting to watch. A lot of people thought that they wouldn't bring that element compared to the previous generation of cars, and I think with the hybrid and the power that's on tap to the drivers, they look great, they sound great, they go great. Very exciting car, and the crews themselves seem to like them as well, other than those maybe early issues with in-car temperatures and co-driver comfort, as it were. As a formula, though, I think Rally 1 Hybrid arrived perhaps too late and was always going to be hampered by the fact that the standardized hybrid unit was then no means for that manufacturer to as a selling point for their road cars, because it wasn't, a winning Toyota hybrid or a winning Ford hybrid or a winning Hyundai hybrid, etc. I think that in itself was an inherent flaw in the category, and obviously it did fail in that the intention was to draw more manufacturers in, which of course it didn't. But quite like the cars, I've quite liked the last two seasons to watch, but for me, it did seem kind of doomed or almost dead on arrival, personally.
Well, for me, I think firstly, the cars, I think they are truly spectacular. And I think that it's human nature sometimes to, when you're living in the moment of something, to not fully appreciate what you've got. And I sometimes are very quick to criticize these current cars, but I do believe that we will look back on them and think, wow, they were amazing, because they are, after all, 500 horsepower rally cars with crazy aero. And it doesn't take much to make the link between that and Group B cars. So why wouldn't we be as passionate and as excited about these cars as we are, obviously, all those Group B favourites that we all adore? So I do think the cars are very spectacular, and I do enjoy watching them. And I think the raw speed of them, which we touched on in the last episode, I think, but the raw speed of the cars is absolutely mind-numbing. They are so fast, and sometimes you watch that footage of them, like at Monty, and it blew my mind. It really blew my mind. So yeah, I think they're great, and there is for me a really big but, because as you just said, Killian, as a formula, it's not really done what it's achieved what it's set out to achieve, and it hasn't brought in new manufacturers. The hybrid thing I've always found a bit of a what should we say? A bit of a kind of a gesture, if you like, to say, look, we're going green, we're eco, but without that independent manufacturer-led element to it, without the technological development of it, it's felt rather hollow to me. Now, look, I totally understand why, because then you get costs escalating more, and I'm not the first person to say that. So I get that, but I think it's almost torpedoed itself, because it's got the double whammy of not having achieved in getting more manufacturers in, but it also doesn't doesn't help the manufacturers that have gone after it kind of advertise the fact that they're hybrid cars. And moreover, I think if we look at the wider picture, of course, there are plenty of hybrid cars still out there in the production car world, but at the same time, they're no longer the coming thing. And that, again, I think takes a bit of the shine and the luster off what could have been a great idea. But as you said, Killian, you know, maybe a great idea 6 years ago or 8 years ago, but it's felt a little bit like just, paying sort of lip service to some of that, some of those issues, without really adding anything.
Yeah, it felt rather reactionary to me, to be honest. It wasn't leading the way in any sort of technological development or showing the average, you know, car buyer, Joe Blogs on the street, what this technology can do, because it's been around for so long now. And as you said, it was just sort of a gesture more than anything else.
I mean, I think there's going to be quite a lot of this kind of talk. I mean, I think that the powers that be, in some respects, were caught between a rock and a hard place when it comes to the hybrid element, because you're both completely right. It would have been far more fascinating if we got to see almost like a sort of tire war type thing of, you know, different manufacturers' development potential of their hybrid systems. But of course, you know, it's not the 80s and 90s anymore, and we can't allow car makers just to sort of spend willy-nilly, because they'll spend themselves into an arms race and then take the hump and one of them will take the ball and leave. So yeah, a weird few years, and you're completely right. I mean, I think slightly a few years out of step, not helped by the fact that it was delayed, of course, by the COVID virus, but not that would have been completely transformative, I don't think.
No, but I also think, guys, you know, and we're going to touch on this, and I think what we've just what we're about to discuss is a reaction to these rules, but they were a formula very much aimed at manufacturers, and they've got that. They got what they wanted in that those three manufacturers accepted them and ran with it. But because it was so manufacturer aimed, when other manufacturers haven't taken it up, then we've got this vacuum, we've got this void, perhaps is a better word, where no one else can play. And you see that in the World Championship, because there just aren't enough cars in the top category, but no one else can jump in and do it, because no other manufacturers have signed up to something which is very niche and not that appealing really in the bigger picture. And we've ended up in the situation that we're in, and we're about to discuss, I think, what, you know, the natural progression of that, which is to go in very much a different direction.
Absolutely. And I think that's a good point to move on to the first effective announcement from the working group, which would be the from 2025, the very start of next year, of course, hybrid removed entirely from all the cars. This means a mooted 100 kilogram reduction in weight for each car. Power will be paid at 330 bhp via a reduced restrictor. And of course, less extravagant aerodynamics to make things cheaper and hopefully make the cars move around a little bit when being driven at the very edge. These cars, these revised Rally1 cars, will remain eligible until 2027, after which they'll be replaced by new WRC spec cars, as they've been termed of various people, though of course still called Rally1, and we're still sharing much of the core architecture, which we'll get to later. But the space frame and lots of the safety equipment will be carried over wholesale, which I'm sure we can all agree is probably a good thing, because they've demonstrated that nothing else, they're pretty damn tough, these cars. So that's a good thing.
I think I was very surprised at the announcement last week with this point in particular, because obviously rumors had started to circulate within the previous days leading up to it, that hybrid was going to be completely axed as of 2025, and in talking to a few people, I've voiced very strongly that I would have been completely shocked if that was indeed the case. Mainly, I guess, because it's so soon. You know, we're already into a new World Championship season. You know, it's putting a lot of pressure on the teams to act. I mean, they already would have had plans for next year's cars to now completely take a different shift and approach to next year's design, but also that they have actually signed up to having that hybrid unit until at least 2026. So there is a contract there for hybrid still until 2026, because obviously that's a separate manufacturer from outside the team. So, I don't know what's to come of that, because I haven't seen anything in that regard. But is the contract now voided? Are they going to pay out on the remainder of the contract? But the teams have signed up to it, but now the teams' hands have been forced, so they're now outside of that contract. But other than that, obviously the weight loss is great. It'll be interesting to see how the cars respond to that. But I think for me, I was very, very surprised to see hybrid go so soon. I would have thought that, yes, in 26 we would have seen the end of it, but the immediacy of the removal was a shock to me.
Yeah, I think even taking on board what we said about hybrid being perhaps yesterday's green technology to a degree, I still think from an outsider's perspective, it's a bit of a bizarre move, and it's going to take some sort of PR massaging to sort of, I don't know, to remove one of the core pillars of WRC being eco-friendly, even if it's only paying lip service. It's the outside view, the outside view of removing a hybrid element, even if it is effectively just a box of volts, as I think someone at Dirtfish referred to it. It's still, I think, we're going to be viewed slightly weirdly by some, and we're going to have to make the championship is going to have to make a lot of hay out of the full use of sustainable fuels, I think.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's a PR challenge, isn't it? I think for me, I feel really excited about this. I don't know whether I just got out of bed the right side or what. I don't know what's going on with me, but normally anything when it involves the FIA and all that, my heart sinks, and I just think, oh no, what's this going to be? I mean, we had it last time, didn't we, with the points system, and I've still got a headache, weeks later. I can't. But I am really excited about this. And actually, fair point, it is pretty gutsy to come in there and ban the hybrid thing off the bat next year. Bosh. Yes. But actually, I really like the fact that they've gone out there, they've made a decision, and they've gone, right, we're going to get on with this because we think this is the right way. And so hats off to DR and the team, because I think they've really gone for it. And these are radical suggestions and changes. So I certainly won't be losing sleep over dropping the hybrid. You probably gathered that from earlier, but to me, it was pure lip service. I know there's a performance thing in it, but we all know with all this stuff, if you change the restrictor size and you allowed it to be 100 kilos lighter, you'd end up with a quicker car. It's not necessarily about the fact that it made it quicker or not. It was about the fact of, as you say, Jamie, about aligning with global issues and pressures on the motor industry and that. And I think it's really important to just make that really clear, because yes, the performance of them was great, but we all know the performance could be the same, just achieved in a different way. It's not any kind of sorcery there. So I don't lose any sleep over that. I think the weight loss is really exciting, because at this level, that kind of weight reduction is going to have a huge impact on the cars. And I can't wait to see how that reflects in how the cars are driven, and driving styles and what have you. The power drop, well, I hate to mention it, and I've got my jar ready and a coin to put in it, but 330 brake horsepower never did a Group A car any harm, did it? I'm sorry.
No Group A car had only 330 brake horsepower.
95 on, maybe.
On paper.
Yeah, maybe a bit low on the low side. But anyway, a later one. I honestly don't think the power, I think as with most things, I think the power is absolutely the last thing that we should be sort of discussing or getting worried about. It's the least of everything, because whatever you've got, it can be exciting. Whether they're let's look at the different rally formulas of the past and what power output they had, and you look at something like a Cleo Williams or something on tarmac, and look how much power that had. It just, the number, to me personally, it's just not that important. Yes, it needs to look spectacular. Yes, they need to be fast because they're the pinnacle. And yes, they need to be quicker than the formulas below that. But the actual number, I mean, will we really, 330, 400, 500? Personally, I just don't think it matters, especially with that weight reduction, because I think the cars will be just so much more agile and kind of active on the road.
And especially with a trimmed back, less reliant on aero as well. So there's going to be less of that.
Well,
of course,
absolutely.
we've got as if we've not had active differentials for a while, but obviously we're not having those back. That's another reason they'll be keeping costs low. But it's not. I completely agree with you. I think people can get too hung up on reductions in power. As anyone who's stood stage side, it's never really about peak power. It's about what the car looks like. Whether looks like it's, I don't know, moving around at the ragged edge that makes the car look impressive, I think.
Totally. We want to see spectacular driving. At the end, we want to see great cars being driven in a spectacular manner. I think that's the crux of it. So whether they're going at 80 mile an hour on the stage or 92 miles an hour on the stage, who cares? That's not necessarily where those ingredients come together.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think at any point when this announcement was made that it entered my head. I never went, oh damn, we've just lost over 100 horsepower. It never factored into my thoughts realistically. And again, as you say, stage side, you're not going to know anyway. And you can compensate for that in other ways. And if the car is now going forward, moving about that bit more with the trim back aero, as Jamie said, we're not going to be thinking about power. We just want to see these things on the ragged edge, being driven by people at the top of their game, sounding great, looking great. We're not going to say, oh, well, it was much better when it had an extra 70 horsepower or 170 horsepower. That's not going to be a discussion we're having in 2 years' time.
I guess the other point of discussion is the one that I think probably most people thought. There was this assumption, I think, that any announcement was going to involve the idea that Rally 2 was going to be simply promoted to the top of the field, the top rung, as it were, at the expense of Rally1, which of course hasn't happened. What we've actually got, or what has been mooted, is a kind of best of both worlds, whereby we'll have Rally1 cars and then Rally2 Plus, as it has colloquially been called. I don't think anyone at the FAA has seized on that yet, which is obviously intended to close the gulf between the two top tiers, which so many drivers and people associated with the teams have commented on. I mean, obviously it's a bit ironic because just last week we were discussing Rally2 cars winning stages in Sweden, but that's a unique set of circumstances. But it does need to be closed, and in doing so, encouraging privateers to partake at WRC level. The mooted means of going about this is going to be a kit of parts to increase the power of Rally2 cars, but only on WRC rounds. Of course, regional, national championships will still stick with as they are. The kit has yet to be fully shaken down and finalised, but generally most people are talking about a 33mm restrictor, the option of running paddle shift, larger exhaust, and a more advanced aerodynamic package. It's been rumoured to cost €5,000, but where things I think are going to get a little bit woolly is that I think David Richards has said that the FAA has no plans to mandate or enforce this figure. There was a discussion, I believe, with Malcolm Wilson about how M Sport could, in theory, offer this right now, because a restrictor isn't exactly the most advanced thing in the world in this day and era. But it does still strike me as the kind of thing that, if you give companies and competitors an inch, then they'll take a mile. And I think that has the potential not to spiral out of control cost-wise, but I still think €5,000 is probably a little bit ambitious considering the sport and what we know about it.
Yeah.
Well, you go first, Killian.
Oh yeah, that €5,000 figure, I can't see any world where that's happening. Especially in a world of mandated cost caps and things, which we know are already being circumvented in every Rally2 car as it is, and other categories as well. To me, this Rally2 Plus kit is a very mixed bag. I think it's the thing that people will have the biggest issue with here. It could potentially lead to I suppose we go back to the Tour de Corse in the late 90s with the kit cars beating the World Rally cars, and the World Rally car crew has been pretty miffed that these cheaper, lighter cars could, beat them at their own game. Obviously, that was more of a surface dependent event, but if these Rally 2 Plus cars are indeed going to get as close to the Rally 1 machines as David Richards intends, it's going to cause a few heads to turn. These teams and engineers are putting in huge effort and huge cost to develop these Rally 1 cars. You're really sort of, for me, it's kind of undermining the category a bit more, I guess. And I get that they want to encourage more privateers to compete with these guys on like national events and things like that. But I think for me, this is a little bit of a step too far. I don't know why it's here, frankly. If you're already winding back the cost of the Rally 1, and it's only going to be a couple of years away before we get the Gen 2 Rally 1 cars, is this going to be enough to draw more people in? Is it going to get those like private entries or whatever to be competing, local drivers on national events stepping up, getting close to Rally 1 cars on times? I don't really see the point in it, but that's just me.
I think I'm maybe a little bit more favourable about it than you, Killian, on this one. I see the potential for confusion and chaos, as ever, with rallying that could happen. But I think I see where David Richards is coming from. The new rules for Rally 1, yes, they're exciting, but these things always take time. And as a way of getting more competitive cars on events, I can see this working. And one thing that I heard which kind of resonated with me was, and it may have been Richards that said this himself, but he was talking about a scenario, I think, where on a international round of the World Championship, that national drivers could enter and stand more of a chance of getting a good result. And that kind of brought back memories of watching the RAC or Rally GB, depending on how old you are, and the best drivers in the British Championship kind of bothering the international, the world works teams on the event, and I think that's great. I'm just all for that. It's more competition. I think one of these cars will actually be really cool, really exciting, really good to watch. The idea of a Rally 2 car with a bit more power, etc., could be good. Yes, there is the confusion aspect there, but it's interesting because those Rally 2 cars are based on all those super minis, and a lot of those super minis are going out of production anyway. Like Fiesta's going out of production. So, what the long term, whether long term it would continue to be an issue, I'm not sure. But I think if you've got one of those cars, and let's face it, there are so many cars out there, it's an interesting way of getting those cars into competitions that they wouldn't otherwise be able to reach. So I'm perhaps a bit more positive about it.
I'm probably somewhere in the middle, and I think there's potentially a lot of excitement, but equally it's kind of interesting to me that it's almost been designed and publicly almost acknowledged as a stopgap with almost a degree of built-in obsolescence, in as much as David Richards even said in that phone call he did to the media, if I was to project onto the future, I think you'll see fewer Rally 2 cars being homologated because that category of car is quietly disappearing now, as Adam said. I think when we get to 2028, you might find that the new Rally 1 car that we're announcing now for 26 will become a dominant factor, which of course is by design. But yeah, I mean, you see, I think it's almost like an acknowledgement of the weird state that the global automotive world is in. No one's the right path has yet to be discerned, with Hyundai, I think, being quite beholden to more to hybrids. And generally, I'm on about mass market. Ford is very EV focused, and Toyota sort of oscillates between hydrogen and full EV. And until that's been decided, I think that when the pieces fall into place, then Rally 1 will obviously hopefully, touch wood, hit its stride, and Rally 2 Plus is kind of this stepping stone to get there, or a placeholder, as it were, maybe until to buy the championship time, but not one without merits or potential, I might say.
Yeah, I'd agree with you, Jamie. I think that's very fair.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It was ultimately the reason for all of this happening, and the original, what do you want to call it, an issue or not, but the hybrid Rally1 car is that, this period for the automotive industry in general is probably the wildest, the most influx it's ever been in a century, perhaps.
Yeah.
There is no clear direction. Buying habits and what people are getting on forecourts have changed dramatically. As you mentioned, the Super Mini, as we know it, is almost going to cease to be a category in the next decade. I think that's fair to say. I think if you look at the Puma Rally1 car, is actually very good evidence to that. In the top category at the moment, that is a mini SUV. Is it a CSUV, compact SUV crossover, whatever terminology is being used now? And as you said, if you look at a Skoda Fabia Rally 2 car, by the time that's out of homologation, what's that being replaced with? Is it going to be forgive me, I can't keep track of all the
Kodiak.
compact. Is it a Kamiq or a Karoq is the smaller one? I can't keep
I
track
hope
of
not.
all the Volkswagen group homogenized Zanussi compact SUV type things.
Certainly not going to be Octavia, is it? Let's say that
Yeah. So that's ultimately where we have all this in the first place, but David Richards is right. The Super Mini is disappearing, so it's Rally 2 has a very interesting future ahead of itself as well, as we discussed Rally 1. But when these cars go to homologation, we're never going to see a three-door Yaris ever again. The Yaris in itself may not exist. You can buy many three-door cars as it is now. So what's going to replace them? They're going to be bigger, taller, or is even Rally 2 in the future going to switch to a space frame chassis? But that's probably a discussion for another day. But it's very hard to discern where we're going in terms of the automotive industry. Be it EV, as you say, Toyota is switching around, Honda's pulled out of EV, Mercedes has recently axed a lot of EV projects. So I think what we thought was going to be the future is maybe EV is looking like more of a bridge again. So it's without any crystal ball, it's very hard to know where the future of the industry lies, and then as a knock on into the sport then too.
Flat 4 turbos on synthetic fuel, that's definitely the way forward.
Well,
I think. Sorry, go on, Jamie.
No, it should be the way forward, but I worry that we're kind of allowing us to. I don't want to be the horrible voice of reason, but I still don't think it's the way to I want that, but I still don't think it's going to encourage a Renault to take the plunge. I mean, I think I could be wrong, but hasn't Renault said specifically that it has no intention of doing so unless it's fully plug-in, fully electrified? I think it was one of the French car makers that said, and yeah. I'm going to get a lot of flack for this. I think there's a lot of people in the wider rallying world, either associated with or probably actually not associated, people who are just fans like myself, who don't want to accept the idea that the internally combustion cars aren't going to be the way forward for much longer. It is just a stay of execution, I fear.
This is a much bigger topic, isn't it now? And obviously, if we did have a crystal ball, we'd all be extremely wealthy blokes. But no, we don't know, do we? That's the thing. And rather than spout on for ages about what might be and what might not be, I think the best thing to say is, and I think we'll come on to this in a second, won't we, when we look at the 2027 rules. I think the best thing to observe from all this is that they've thought about the flexibility to respond to these pressures, if you like. And that's absolutely crucial, I think, because the kind of more, should we say, the dogma of the rules that we've just discussed the ending of has been proved that they don't work because they're far too tight and they're not responding to what's happening in the industry. And we have to do that because very soon we will be looking at a situation where they're not those classically the cars we love, the homologation specials, long gone, but there won't even be necessarily enough normal cars, in this case, over the last decade or so, small cars to even base the cars on. So there's no point being really dogmatic about it and attached to one particular set of rules. There has to be flexibility and agility. And yeah, I think this is thankfully looks to be the direction we're heading in.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think like the overall, this whole announcement has been quite positive. It's something that we can get excited about, and it's one of the better things to come out of these sort of working groups over the years. Certainly, it hasn't been one that you read with a big sigh and a kind of roll of the eyes. It is quite exciting, and as you say rightly, it's opened up that flexibility far more. And again, they know, because as we've said, there's so much flux now. I think they've been really smart here, and I think ultimately it will, and it should, deliver a better result for us, which is the goal, obviously.
Yeah. But sometimes it feels like, and this is across all different types of motorsport, but sometimes it feels like the fans, the spectators aren't taken into consideration. And then sometimes it feels like the manufacturers are dealt a bit of a raw deal in when regulations change and they've invested a lot of money and then it changes. But I can't help feeling that this is a very pragmatic approach. I think this working group, it sounds like they did that survey, didn't they? I don't know how much of that went into this, but I assume it was taken into consideration. But it feels like they've thought about what maybe the fans want, but they've also not only thought about what the manufacturers that are in now would want, but actually what's going on in the industry and what the reality of it is. And I think that's, yeah, I take my hat off. I think that's really good to see.
Couldn't agree more. And I think flexibility is key. And as Adam alluded to earlier, the biggest evidence of that, or the clearest evidence, is in the the idea that the revised Rally1 cars, which we will see from 26, but probably more likely 27, because let's face it, 26 is not very far away at all. Revised Rally1 cars with the space frame carried over from the current Rally1 cars, albeit enlarged and further refined, which of course good for safety, good for a degree of cost saving. Really interesting thing about this is the idea, well, two things. I think first, the FIA, or David Richards, says that the FIA plans to supply the tooling for the space frame, which in theory means that these cars can be built by any workshop, any car preparation, or even tuner, I think was mooted around the world using the jigs and the tooling, which will be available from the FIA, presumably supplied by a third party, which will, and then this is the really good, interesting, flexible thing, the idea that will allow a variety of different car segments to be rallied, B class, C class, or even shudder SUVs and concept cars. Well, I know. Puma, yeah, it looks good. Yeah, I know. Still, and concept cars. I mean, that's a weird one. I don't know if that'll come to fruition, but we shall see. But as you've both alluded to, that it's definitely evidence of the FIA looking forward and trying to get ahead of what the automotive world is going to do, and giving sort of flexibility to move with it, I dare say.
Yeah, I think this is where it gets really, really interesting, and I think this ties into perhaps the debate about the promoter and where the championship is going, and its coverage, its fan base, etc., etc. Because, and I know this might make me unpopular saying this, but I'm always brought back to an interview with Francois Delacour, and he was talking about the 997 GT3 going rallying, and saying that whilst younger viewers out there love the small French hatchbacks, to really get people interested, I think he said from the streets of Paris, those sort of people, they wanted to see Porsches. They wanted to see those kind of marks. And one of the things that I've found a real turn off over the last decade or so is this complete focus on that small hatchback segment of car. Because even if it was, I'm not saying it has to be Porsches, but you think back to things like Imprezas and Evos, they were bigger cars, and they just had that slightly more exotic feel. Now, as I say, I'm sure there'd be people out there that will rubbish that and say, look at a Fiesta R5 or a World Rally car, Yaris. Yeah, they are spectacular, but they're still quite small cars. They're still small hatchbacks. And I think if you go out into the wider world and talk to people about cars like that, there's still perhaps a little bit of a stigma attached. Whereas if you could start getting different shapes, totally different shapes, different sizes of cars, suddenly it just gets so much more interesting, I think, not only to real diehard fans, but to other people. I mean, there's so much possibility in these rules. And the idea that tuners and I mean, I bet you guys have already been thinking about certain cars that could be made, or well, these rules give space for that, and I think that's really exciting.
I was going to say just briefly, and I think it also makes one of the fact that there's a less of a link between race on Sunday, sell on Monday barely exists anymore, which of course has been a bit of a bugbear for, I don't know, 20 years, probably 30. But by doing this, it's almost made that a positive. You can lean into, so going on what Adam said, you can lean into the fact that, no one believes truly that what's being campaigned on the power stage on Sunday has any real relevance to what's been flogged on Monday. So if that's gone and you disregard that, then why not make a space framed, I don't know, yeah, exactly, insert what you'd like, and yeah, it's making one of the weirder thing, one of the trickier stumbling blocks, potentially a positive.
Well, that's it. If the race on Sunday, buy on Monday is gone, commit to that properly, row into it, and just use it to grow your brand. I mean, again, I think I alluded to WEC last week. If you asked any of the three of us 3 or 4 years ago that WEC would have the strength of entry from so many different manufacturers in the top category going into this year, and not all of whom have any sort, well, not that they don't have motorsport history, but certainly the likes of Cadillac would never have had a rich motorsport history in terms of sports car racing. They're there now, and people are very excited by that. Even over in Europe, where Cadillac isn't really as much of it isn't really a brand that you can walk down the street and buy. Like, that could bring the likes of these concept cars. You could see the likes of that in rallying, and it may not be a brand like that, but even it could be a Porsche, or it could be something more exotic that you can see a one-off, and it's just going to, it'll grow their brand, it'll grow their presence on the world stage. We could see them in smaller number, perhaps, or competing on select events, but it definitely opens it up to so much more. We could see these new shapes, and it would be nice to get away from 5-door super minis or 3-door super minis. For sure. I know we lament the loss of the 3-box saloon, but at least when the 3-box saloon was there, it was up against, there was hatchbacks there too. There's the 3-box saloon car. We had a coupe. We had coupes, all competing simultaneously. Instead of the early World Rally Car era, we could see the likes of that again now, which would certainly, I think would be pleasing to everybody.
Of course, the interesting thing is, or one of the many interesting things, is how on earth you sort of get a balance of performance with so many inherently different sizes of car. And it's going to be very interesting to see how this is managed. I mean, David Richards said it's going to be done via I've referenced torque curve, so you can assess what cars are making power where, and sort of moderate it as such. Tightly controlled aerodynamics and adjustments to the center of gravity, which I can well imagine how much extra help some sort of, I don't know, big potential, an SUV or something that would require to be made competitive with something with a far lower center of gravity. So that'll be quite interesting. And of course, this comes with a raft of further additions to try and keep costs, if not exactly low, then certainly more reasonable. There's talk of a control transmission being used as well, which is no bad thing in my view. And all aspects other than the stuff we've discussed is going to be grounded in Rally2 tech, so aero, transmissions and suspension. And David Richards seems very, very confident that he can get a baseline of a top tier of 400,000 euros for a 27 spec Rally1 car, which I know I kind of believe it when I see it, because these things always run over. But either way, even if it comes at 450,000, I mean, it's not small beer, is it? But compared to what we're looking at the moment, it's positively reasonable.
Absolutely.
If indeed that happens.
Well, yeah. Well, he seems to think it will be quite a lot below 400,000. That's his guess, and I mean, I think he highlighted the point that you can't stop manufacturers spending the money, but you've just got to try and make money, not necessarily the be all and end all difference. And that by leveling the playing field, you hopefully will get some more young drivers getting access to quick cars, which I think we all probably agree it desperately needs to happen. Do you guys know what is happening with the powertrain? I mean, is it still we're still gonna have to use one powertrain? Because one thing that strikes me, we've seen this in WEC, and you just alluded to that again, Killian. But we've seen, okay, nobody likes balance of performance. It's the devil's work. I can't stand it. But nevertheless, we probably have to accept the fact that there really isn't a better option on the table than balance of performance, and it has. With freer regulations, it does mean that you've got that Cadillac being very competitive. You've got turbocharged V8s, and then you've got V6s. You've got variety. And is there, I mean, hopefully there's a way we can maybe have that in rallying, so we can have a bit more variety in terms of the powertrains that we see. And as we're probably going to go on to talk about the source of the fuel in those powertrains as well.
I don't believe there's been any mooted change to the mandated powertrains at the moment, but again, I suppose it ultimately will tie into what they need to do to attract manufacturers, and if manufacturers want to push an alternative, a powertrain layout or cylinder layout, but that'll be an interesting one to see as well.
Well, yeah, because I mean those engines came in, if I'm right, because the industry was downsizing. That was the buzzword, wasn't it? Mm-hmm. Downsizing. And that feels like very much yesterday's news now. I mean, that's no longer a thing, is it? So why do we have to only have 1600cc full turbocharged engines? You know, with WEC, it's about energy usage, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than the actual exact way you make that, the output.
Falls into the same thing, even though like as you say, you can't buy a 3-door Fiesta anymore, and the vast majority. Can you even get a 1600cc Fiesta these days? I mean, it's only 3-cylinder. It's the largest eco.
Yeah, the ST's the 1500.
Yeah.
1500cc turbo triple, isn't it?
Yeah. So yeah, why not? I mean, I guess it's another thing. Ideas, you know, if you take the sea change and embrace it, then why not just move the goalposts entirely and roll with it, I guess.
I certainly wouldn't be against seeing a triple in Rally1. I mean, maybe I'll get shot for
triple
saying
rotor,
that, but
maybe.
Yeah, I mean, the Toyota already have an engine there. Ford already have an engine in a lower category in a triple. I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that one of these engines could ultimately find their way in a different form into a Rally1 car. It'd be just nice to hear cars that have a distinct sound on the stages and on the TV. And I mean, look, if anyone listening or if you guys have seen and heard the current 208 Rally 3 car, which is also or its clone, the Corsa Rally. Is it Rally 3? No, sorry, my apologies. Rally 4 car going past you. The noise of that thing, it's nearly louder than a Rally 1 car, and it's popping and banging like a mad yuck. So it would be exciting and interesting to have a different sound into the mix.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of sounds, I mean, this is I guess the devil that's I think it's understandable why there's been no firm commitment about when and if there should be a full electric switchover. But the working group does say that the FIA wants to introduce a standalone, fully electric class as soon as possible, and that this electric class will make full use of the Rally1 space frame and basic architecture. And that there'll be an mission to achieve competitive parity with the internally combusted Rally1 cars running on sustainable fuel. So I guess this is we've similarly talked about. You can't ring fence what or set in stone what things we're going to be. We don't know what things are going to be like in 5 years' time or even less. So I guess it's quite smart. I would say that I think they're going to want to introduce an electric class. I mean, within a year or two, to be honest, because we can't find ourselves, even if it doesn't lead to anything, I still think it's dangerous to be caught trailing the automotive world as we were 10 years ago. I think the sport needs to be seen to be at least keeping parity or keeping abreast with what the big fish of the car world want.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I guess, I'm not one of these people who wants to completely shut down the idea of a fully electric rally car. I think, you know, yes, as you rightly say, Jamie, it needs to happen sooner rather than later if it's to mean anything at all, whether it runs alongside Rally 1 or not. Again, it could end up falling foul of what Rally1 Hybrid did, and it just kind of arrived too late and meant nothing. I mean, the consumer doesn't need to be sold EV at this point. They're already buying it. So, how are the manufacturers going to feel about it? But what it brings really is potentially a dramatic change in event format, particularly if we get to a point where a combustion engine rally car is phased out. The format of a World Rally Championship weekend will have to be really, really, really different to what we know it as now. Then obviously the infrastructural changes that need to go along with it.
I think for me, I have to split myself in two on this one. I think half of me, look, I think this is a really good thing. I think it's really important that they do this. I agree they need to get on and do it as quickly as possible. And I think that's where the ASAP line comes in. And I think that's right, because as you say, Killian, they can't be dragging their feet on this. They're already behind the curve. And we can't, we can't simply pretend that it's, not the same. It's not always going to be Cosworth YBs with anti-lag, is it? It's just not going to be that. Having said that, I have no desire, should we say, to watch a Formula E race, and I never will watch one. And therefore, do I have any interest in electric motorsport? No, I don't, because that's not. I watch motorsport for the sound and everything else. It's part of it, and for me, that doesn't. It just doesn't do it. So personally, no, I don't. But do I think that's a reason for not doing it? Absolutely not at all. I think it's really important that they do this and see where it goes. And as you said, who knows where it goes? So that's the point, isn't it? We offer this, we see what happens. It might turn out to be brilliant. It might not, but you won't know until you're in the game.
It's a fine line between sort of being forward-looking about that kind of thing and appearing to come across as a dinosaur, which I think, I don't want to speak for you two, but I think like Adam says, my innate desire is to basically, I don't know, protect internal combustion rallying and the idea of, I don't know, being in a Welsh rally stage and just hearing the sound of swooshing gravel and no engine note really is anathema. But yeah,
would you go and watch it? That's the thing. Would you? I don't personally think I would go and watch it. And who's to say that is the future? Sometimes that's the thing that gets me a little bit. People say, well, that's definitely going to be the future. Well, we don't know that's going to be the future, do we? Because we don't know. I mean, again, we're getting onto a much, much bigger topic here, but surely the common sense approach is a multiple fuel future with the best form for whatever that vehicle's doing. And there's definitely, only a fool would say there isn't a place for EV in that mix. Of course, there is a place for EV. There's absolutely a place for EVs, but it's highly likely that there'll be a place for other things as well. And so I absolutely don't think we should give up our sustainable fuel running internal combustion engines unnecessarily, should we say.
A whole lot of VHS or Betamax thing going on, really, isn't there? Which I'm probably going to alienate. It's before my time. But so
Blu-ray or HD DVD, if you want to bring it up to speed.
Yeah, even that though, Killian. I mean, you've added on a decade
20 years ago. Yeah.
Jamie was for the Group B, and you've gone up to the edge of the World Rally car era. Well done. You really made us seem topical.
What was the viable alternative to mini discs? Probably MP3, I suppose.
Yeah, but you're exactly right, and I think, look, again, it's a much larger topic, but it's becoming increasingly clear that we're not moving to an electric future. We're moving to multiple forms of propulsion But at least this new formula, or the potential formula, and it's particularly the space frame tubular chassis, will allow for almost anything to fit within that. How those interact with each other, and again, we go back to the dreaded balance of performance. Is that going to rear its head at some point? Who knows? Again, we don't have that crystal ball, but I think, as we pointed out now multiple times, this is probably the best thing that can have been done to allow for that. No one can see into the future. So given that hampering everyone, I think this has been a reasonably positive suggestion and outline of where we're moving as a sport.
Yeah, and I think, look, we probably all hate balance of performance, and as I say, I certainly hate it in the roundy stuff. I really do, but I think we just have to accept that, especially with technology like it is and computing power like it is, that it is it's possible to analyze things to such a point where there is only one quick, there is a quickest way of doing it, and that variety that we once had of cars, with the kind of technology that is now at our disposal, that's never going to be like that again. And we're kidding ourselves if we think it is, because if you just give engineers the means, the money, the technology to create something, then these days they will analyze it, and we will come up with the quickest way. And so then if you turn up with an Octavia VRS World Rally car, that's not going to be competitive, which is when you end up with something like the GT3 class, and you have a Bentley Continental GT racing perfectly fine with 911 GT3Rs and Ferraris and Lamborghinis. Well, we all know that's a sleight of hand. It's a nonsense, really. It's a total nonsense, and it is marketing. It's fake, but it's a good fake. It's a fun thing. It allows different shapes and different types of cars. And it's probably the only way that we can do it, because otherwise the Bentley is going to be 2 laps behind very quickly. It's just not going to be a thing. So again, with rallying, we're going to have to accept probably that some meddling like that is necessary. Otherwise, we will end up with a distinct lack of variety, and we'll all be moaning about how the fact there are no interesting cars and no interesting exhaust notes.
And a better myself, yeah, absolutely. Anything more to add on that, Killian?
No, I think that's pretty much covering all of that in as good a way as any can be covered.
That's what I thought. Of course, sporting changes also formed a key component of the working group suggestions for the future of the WRC. These mainly concerned the format and length of each round. So now WRC rallies will be given greater freedom to decide the format of their specific events, similar to Rally Italy's trial 48-hour setup running from Friday to Sunday afternoon. Although all events must still finish with a power stage on Sunday, other than that, there's going to be enhanced freedom, specifically what time they kick off on a Friday. The 2025 calendar will include a mix of sprint and endurance, in air quotes, rallies, but the total mileage of the course of the whole season will remain the same. And there's also there's further desire to try and drive down costs. There's going to be cutbacks and stricter limitations on the number of technicians permitted to work on a 3-car team. Service parks will make greater use of locally sourced infrastructure, which makes a lot of sense. Let's be honest. We don't need the crazy triple-decker, executive lounges that have become part of the course in recent decades. Let's get crews. Let's get them back with gazebos and muddy bits of plastic. And of course, remote servicing mooted to return in 2025. We'll have more details on that, I believe, in the summer. So yes, that's one of those things that you can hear like a collective nerdgasm from people, myself very much included.
I don't know about you guys, but the absolute first thing I thought of, literally the first thing I thought of when I read this was I was just picturing sort of sneezing and hissing Delta S4s in some incredibly rundown, rubbish Italian Fiat dealership in the middle of a city somewhere, with all these Abarth mechanics everywhere. I was just like, that was just the first thing. I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
But with the roadside servicing now, or the remote servicing, and the modern Formula and the space frame cars, we can't have some guy flagged down to borrow the axle off his Capri V6 uh, to get someone going again. Unfortunately, but I don't know. Maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing either.
I still think as long as we get the juxtaposition of cutting edge rally cars, as Adam says, being spannered in otherwise really prosaic, I don't know,
Yeah,
network
well, that'd be
queues in.
Stellantis, wouldn't it? I'd be like a Stellantis dealership now.
Yeah, wow,
Yeah.
hasn't got quite the appeal of a rundown Peugeot Talbot dealership with a
Oh,
205 T16 and milk bottle salad and smoking away manically outside. But
Massive pile of fag ends stacking up next to the
higher
steps
and
into the trailer. Yeah,
next to that highly flammable special one-off fuel.
yeah.
There's a Talbot Samba poodles around in the background with some old deer trying it out. Yeah.
Yeah, I put my car in for a service today. Get out of the way. I think this. I mean, the thing that I have to say, one of the things that really annoys me about Formula One, for example, is all the endless rules, the endless pedantic rules. And so this, to me, this is more sort of deregulation, and I think it's great. I think this is what should be happening. This freedom to organisers, whether it's the length of the rally or the servicing format or whatever it is. This is what we need. We need more personality and character into events. The more we can get of that, the better. And I just think this is a great thing to come out of this working group. And I think it just shows the people in it get what makes rallying special and should never have been lost in the first place. I mean, it should never, how did we end up in this? And to that point, you mentioned about the super servicing structures. And I remember when they really started to come in, and obviously manufacturers' PRs were going, look at this, isn't it wonderful? And we're all supposed to go, yeah, it's wonderful. I'm thinking, no, it's not wonderful at all. It's wonderful for those guests that you've invited that don't really care about the rallying anywhere and are just on a freebie and are going to eat your free food and drink your free drink and go, isn't it lovely? Yeah, probably great for them, but it's not great for the normal spectator, the thousands of spectators. It moves the cars further away from them, and it kills the atmosphere. So it's not. No, I'm not impressed. I don't think it's a great thing. So I think anything like this is really, really positive for the sport at the spectator, at the grassroots level. I think it's great.
Yeah, and especially we've mentioned the word sustainability a lot throughout this podcast, but
yeah,
it goes back to if we're looking at people are often making the point about Formula One. Apparently, what are they trying to hit net zero by 2030? They ain't. Well, they're flying all those things around the world. With rallying, like that's a huge step, because I mean any local place can provide more than enough infrastructure to do to have a service park or a remote servicing area without shipping these monstrosities around the planet to X amounts of events around the world. So that's a huge step in that direction as well. I think, because I think often with motorsport is guilty of a lot of self-contradiction when it comes to sustainable this and hybrid that and electrification this. Meanwhile, there's 20 DAF lorries parked around the corner. It doesn't really go hand in hand with that. So I think that's good to see, because we should be making those steps as a sport as well. So I think that's a really positive one. That's really easy to make and has really no negative effects for anybody, bar, as you say, those guests who potentially won't watch a rally stage.
They need to all be mandated to use an Iveco Turbo daily. That needs to be brought back. That all top tier rallying has to be conducted from the outside of the back of an '89 Iveco Turbo daily.
They can be resto modded ones, Jamie. Though they can have like EV powertrains or whatever, and play the green card. All of that. But, yeah.
What's the wheelbase of an Iveco Turbo Daily compared to the biggest Tesla you can buy? And you just graft one onto this chassis.
Ford have done that electric mental transit thing, haven't they? So it can be done.
I passed only last week when I was in the States a Rivian Amazon delivery base setup place. They're using Rivian electric vans now. Big units, and they had quite a lot of them, and they're quite an impressive thing to behold. So they can make those, I'm sure. No, granted, Amazon delivery may not be carrying the same sort of weight that rally servicing might be as well. So it might affect the range somewhat.
But it's an interesting point, though, isn't it? I mean, it could be something that could be mandated, and actually, there's a green card that could be paid, could be PR'd. The championship say, well, all our support vehicles are EVs. Cars run on sustainable fuel, but all the support stuff is EVs. I mean, and none of us would go, oh no, that that kind of Peugeot, whatever van, diesel, whatever it is, I can't, I'm going to miss that so much. We wouldn't care, would we?
No, and particularly for. Sorry, Jamie.
Well, Jamie would, because obviously he's stuck with the turbo daily. But
I was going to say that all service vehicles have to be sourced in the country that we're turning up at on site, and it's a scramble to search the local classified to see who gets the most suitable vehicle. Now that I think we can all get behind.
Your flight's delayed and you end up with a Suzuki Super Carry.
Oh my God. Right,
and that's before we've even got onto chase cars and things like that. Nice old travel weary legacy estate.
Be still my beating heart. 405s,
extra aerials.
This is where I go to the photograph of the Liam O'Callaghan Corolla Estate chase car with the Celica GT4 3-spokes on it, fully racked out with tyres.
Love that car.
And sitting completely on its arse with the weight of said roof rack and spare wheels. Yeah.
Or Andy Burton's custom Range Rover Classic with the fold-out racks in the back full of stuff for his 306. But anyway, yes. But yeah, no, I think we're all right. This is the kind of stuff that really does make complete sense. All these suggestions, I can't see. I mean, unless you're, I guess, one of the people unlucky enough to have your job perhaps rerouted or whatever. If you're not allowed to work on one of the Rally1 cars at events away. But yeah, and completely, I'm very much in favour of giving individual rally events greater freedom to adjust and play with the setup and the actual running order and that kind of thing, because I mean, I remember all those years ago back in the 90s when the FIA was trying to sort of force rallies into an identical format, the one that we've become accustomed to over the years, and it did sort of feel we were necessary, because let's face it, rallying is already quite a tricky thing to explain to your average non-rally person in the street, but it did feel we were losing some of the unique specialness. I'm not saying we need to go back to Lombard RAC starting on a Monday and running through the working week, but it'll be nice to see a bit of variety. Because I am okay, but
yes, you are.
Until I perfect the time machine, then I'm going to have to retain a degree of reality.
But I think you're right. I mean, that a lot of that was David Richards, wasn't it, in the late 90s?
Exactly that. Yeah.
But I think that was maybe because they were thinking about making it far more accessible to TV. And of course, terrestrial TV not being a thing anymore necessarily, then you don't need that, and you can have this flexibility. And I'm so pleased that they're making noises that they're going to go back to that. And a lot of these things, I think rallying is about being amongst the people. That's one of the things that makes rallying so special, isn't it? It's not about having a rally and the people going to it. It's about taking the rally to the people rather than vice versa. So anything that gets to that is, it's great.
Bring back the Mickey Mouse stages.
It makes sense. Absolutely. Because again, that was bringing the rally to the people, wasn't it? And lo and behold,
experience of it.
Same here.
Yeah. And that's what remote servicing is doing as well. I mean, that's another opportunity for people to access it, especially with the ground that's covered on events. Now, the actual, I mean, the average spectator on a world event now, I mean, will find it incredibly difficult to get near a service park, or may not even want to, because it'll actually, they're sacrificing so much time elsewhere. So, in an increasingly homogenized world, this sort of dehomogenization, if that's even a word, I welcome it. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much, guys. I think that just about wraps it up. Really, really good to hear and analyse all the fallout from the working group's findings. And I'm sure I speak for all three of us when we'd like to hear what you guys think, because it's bound to generate more than its fair share of discussion. And of course, it's got to be noted that this isn't all set in stone. These are all suggestions so far. Doubtless a lot of it will be implemented, but nothing's set in stone yet. And it's a case of finding out more, I believe, in June or July, when we'll hear more. So thank you very much for listening, everyone. We'll be back very shortly with another episode.
Fortunately enough, maybe timing wise, in the coming weeks, we'll be having a chat with an engineer from one of the current top world rally teams who maybe can shed a bit more light now on the challenge facing teams with the new regulations going forward. So that one is dropped into our lap at maybe the best time possible.
I'm off to think about Olio Fiat signs on the side of a dealership with a Delta S4 parked underneath.
I'm off to price up Iveco Turbo Dailies. There we are.
Yes. And with that, on that bombshell, as they say.
I better not be stuck with the Suzuki Super Carry then. Thanks very much for listening.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
Goodbye.
Bye. Bye.